Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Podqasted. Today's guest is Scoobmeister. Scoobmeister is an Australian pro Halo player who has competed for teams such as Mindfreak and Bittersweet at a top level in ANZ Halo, qualifying several times to attend NA HCS major events. Today we talk about Scoob's ups and downs as a competitor, the experience of competing at a high level on mouse and keyboard in Halo, the state of ANZ Halo and more. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, Mr. Scoobmeister. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning. As I said before, I think it's 7 a.m. for you right now. So
Yeah,
up at the
7 a.m.
crack
on
of
the dot.
dawn. This is what we love to see. I guess the first thing I was interested to talk to you about is I know you're a bit of a newer player, but like, how did you get into Halo like, as a game? Was Infinite like your first Halo, or have you been kind of around for a while playing casually and then kind of got into it recently?
Well, I mean, like, as you know, m most people would share the same experiences as, when they were younger, when they were a kid. They had a run-in with Halo, whether it be, casually just on their Xbox with their friends. But yeah, that was pretty much like my first introduction to Halo back in, I think Reach was my first Halo game that I
Oh,
ever
okay.
really owned. I think the first ever Halo game that I played was Halo 3.
Oh.
But I remember, like, when I was younger, I sold cookies on the street to buy Halo Reach.
Oh my God, that is passion. That is passion.
Yeah, and then, just played Halo Reach casually with my friends. Just on like Xbox Live Infection, all that type of shit. I had no idea what competitive was and all that. I had not been introduced to like that side of it yet, but that was like my first real introduction to Halo, yeah.
Okay, and then I guess how old were you then when you were playing Reach? That was
I was
pretty.
probably like
Oh my
7.
lord. I think my first
Yeah,
Halo was like
6.
Halo 3 and I was like 11 or 12. So yeah, you started early. And I guess you said you weren't really aware then of the competitive scene. I guess when was it that you were like made aware of like competitive Halo like being a thing?
I was probably made aware of competitive Halo probably just barely pre-infinite pretty much, just towards the end of like that off season. Probably the game came out like November 16th,
Yeah.
2021. I sort of got into the scene. I tried to get into the scene like before Infinite to sort of like just know my way around and stuff. So when obviously the game came out, I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I like, I did my research. I looked at tournaments that had happened. I was trying to like research players who was like prominent in the ANZ scene
Yeah.
before Infinite, mainly Halo 5. Um, I think one of the first people who I ever interacted with in the Halo scene for Australia was Chef.
Oh yeah.
And Chef, yeah, previously when he was I Don't,
I love that. I love that game as
before he
well.
changed his name. Um, I remember like following Barcode on Twitch, and watching like one of his MCC Halo 3 streams because I know like before Infinite they would grind Halo 5.8s or like they'd play Halo 3.
Yeah.
And I remember the first thing I ever said in Barcode's chat was, hey, like I'm a new player trying to get into the competitive scene. Do you have any tips? And he basically told me don't get into Halo. It's just not worth it.
No,
That's the first thing Barcode ever said to me.
no, that's not what I wanted to hear. I was thinking like a whole big breakdown of like, oh yeah, you do this. I was just rolling back a little bit. I guess like, were you like always a competitive person? Like Halo was like your next like journey, I guess competitively, or was it a thing of like, I just really like this video game. I like it so much, I might compete in it, or was like you looking for something to compete in?
Um, I think the first ever like title that I really ever tried having a competing in was probably Counter Strike.
Okay.
CS:GO was probably the first game that I ever really had a shot at. I did not really understand like how to compete, what competing is to the extent that I do now after like how much experience that I have. But yeah, it began with Counter Strike, then Splitgate came out. I played that for a little bit of Valorant, not so much, and then pretty much Halo. So I
Okay.
would say Halo is the real competitive like experience that I've had. The previous two were just more casual.
Yeah, and I guess so when you did get into Infinite, and like you said, you were kind of new, you didn't know a lot of people. What was your kind of approach to things? Like, was you taking it like really professionally from the start, or was you kind of just winging it a little bit and then kind of working things out as you went along?
Yeah, I think just the first thing I wanted to do was just sort of get to know people because what appealed to me about Infinite was obviously, a lot of people know me for the fact that I'm like a keyboard and mouse player.
Yeah.
that was like my intention from day one to play keyboard and mouse, because before they'd even announced that like keyboard and mouse was going to be like a viable option for Infinite, I was hoping that it was going to happen, and then it did end up happening. So I was like pretty much just hoping that they were gonna say, yep, keyboard and mouse is allowed to compete.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I was really too focused on what my approach was. I was more so just hoping that I was going to be allowed to play in the first
Yeah,
place.
yeah. I feel like that's most people. Like, it's usually they kind of start off out of passion, and like along the way, when they start getting kind of good, they start like realizing like the best ways to improve and things. And I guess, how did you, I guess, have success quicker than you thought you would in the kind of first year or so of Infinite?
No, definitely not. First year, I would say the first year was a bit of nothing for me. Maybe towards the end, I would say it was our regional event where that was like my first real event where I started to get something going. Because I mean, before the change to keyboard and mouse, it was very rough.
Yeah,
I was playing at a very huge disadvantage, and back then nobody thought that keyboard and mouse would even. It just wasn't possible to make a scratch on anybody that
yeah,
was a controller player, especially majority of keyboard and mouse players coming in as new players, not knowing anything,
yeah,
playing against not only controller players but established players that have been competing most likely their whole lives. Like a lot of the Halo players have been around for ages.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, just I get a real good shot, and then I did progress. Like I did get further, but before the change, my peak was pretty much top six at a
Okay.
like regional event.
Would you say that was like a big, I guess, point in your career when like that change happened and it kind of balanced things out a little bit more with the extra aim assist? Was that like, okay, now I'm like really confident I've got what it takes now to like push that kind of top two, top three in ANZ?
Yeah, definitely. That change definitely really gave me a push. I would say like I was very optimistic before the change as well. My whole mindset of competing, because I was very much aware that I was playing at a disadvantage. Like it was very much obvious, and so many people were even telling me, "I think you would be all right if you switch to controller. Like you have to make the switch." But my whole mindset is that pretty much, uh, like if it's just not possible, then I just like, I shouldn't compete. If I think it's not possible,
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I
and then
just coming into the mindset that everything's possible. Like I should
yeah,
think that I can do it.
okay, and I guess like you said, the first year you didn't have as much success. What would you say was the first kind of real team that you got on where you kind of had that thought of like I'm really making some like serious strides there in kind of terms of like, I guess placements or just like improving maybe in general?
Um, I would say my first roster where I felt like I was, actually making strides within the region was probably it's like the roster that we had post Charlotte, pretty much going into like the Dallas qualifiers for last year, where it was a huge like underdog win for us. It was a huge upset. We were considered the top, like the third best team in ANZ at the time, and then
Okay.
we ended up, and keep in mind like third best was very far from the top two. So
Yeah.
back then the top two were like Divine Mind, Mind Freak. Mind Freak was like was Pips, Plasma, rated Benji. Divine Mind was Sways, Berserk, Madzi, and Slays.
Okay.
And our third place team was just sort of like those top four players,
Yeah, yeah.
those top four, um, yeah,
Very, very
lower tier
similar to
players.
EU in that kind of like respect, right? Where like there was the kind of like Navi quadrant and like everyone else. It felt like, and I guess for you guys it was like a similar story. But was that the one you guys? Was that when you had Looney as the coach for the online qualifier? Was that tournament?
Yeah,
Like when you went to like,
yeah, that was the
was
one.
it
Yeah.
double bracket? Double like bracket reset like best of seven like game seven was it? I think that was yeah that was great. I guess what was that? That wasn't your first time qualifying for NA, was it, or was it that event?
No, that was actually my second time.
Okay,
The
yeah.
first event that I'd been to was Charlotte, and we qualified as the third place team in
Okay,
that
I'm
one.
always curious for that because I think for me, the first time I got to go to like an MLG event, it was like this big milestone in my like competitive like career, I guess, where I was like, oh my god, this is like I've made it now. This is so crazy. I guess was it like a similar feeling for you, or was it like a bit more kind of like you took it in your stride, maybe?
Yeah, I would say I was pretty excited because I felt like I was cutting it real close towards the end of the first year. I was honestly disappointed that I didn't get my first shot in NA before the buff, because I
Yeah,
really like felt like I wanted to prove something,
yeah, yeah,
but still like yeah, it was definitely a really good feeling to go as the third place team. Even though like my perspective now, I know, you know, I wanted to be the best at the time, but
Yeah.
even though we were third place, I still felt like pretty much on top of the world. Like I
Yeah,
was
and
feeling good.
what was that experience like? I guess competing in NA for the first time. Like, I'm assuming you guys probably didn't have the placement you would have wanted, like being your first time over, and like, but was it one of those things where like it kind of gave you the extra motivation of like, okay, like now I know what it's like to like compete in NA and have that feeling of like going over there and kind of having a chance against the best? Did that like give you like extra motivation? I guess kind of going forward.
Um, I would honestly say like obviously I ended up being disappointed, but that was just because I wanted to just keep going. Like obviously you have the dream of just making it out of the open bracket, but
Yeah.
realistically it wasn't going to happen. But we actually did get a pretty good open bracket placing for our first event. I think for Charlotte we ended up finishing like it was like top 24, top 28 overall. It was
Okay.
like top 16 open bracket, which was pretty good
Yeah.
considering there was like 90 teams overall,
Yeah.
and
No,
it
that's good.
being our first event. We actually outplaced Mindfreak in the open bracket
Oh.
at the time as well.
Yeah, the open
Yeah.
bracket back then. I mean, I feel like it is still kind of like crazy now, but I feel like back then it was like a bunch of pro like Australian and like NZ teams, both a bunch of like pro Mexican teams, EU teams, plus like all that random NA teams that like feel like they should be a pro team, but they're not. It was like open bracket in this game is like so stacked. Where and I guess that's a random side question that I'm curious to ask you. Is the whole debate between like should ANZ teams start in pool play, should they start in open bracket? Do you have like a personal preference towards that in terms of what you'd prefer or what you think's like better for the scene?
We definitely don't deserve to be in a pool play. I'm gonna be honest, alright? Because obviously, I understand why those like top NAAM teams that like feel like they should be breaking through. I understand they're right. Like it's valid for them to get pissed off at us. Even though it's not our fault, we didn't choose to be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I would say we do deserve to be there for other reasons when it comes to like exposure
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everything. Because if I think when the update came out, like for the HCS roadmap this year, I went on a big rant on Twitter about how pretty much a pool play spot is bigger than just the result itself and the placing. It's
yeah,
about all that comes with it, and that it means I feel like that stuff means a lot more to ANZ teams
yeah,
than
yeah,
it does for NA teams where they're in the light 24/7. Like
yeah, yeah,
Halo is NA, so for us to come over there and be in that spotlight, it's like very big for us.
yeah.
But realistically, they don't care about that. HCS don't care about that. So yeah,
Do you
but
think
I
it's
would
one of
say
those
we
things where
don't deserve
like,
it.
from like a pure gameplay perspective, maybe if you were number one ANZ team, you probably prefer to play for open bracket because you kind of get more games, you get more competitive games, you go on like that kind of run. But like you said, from a kind of like ANZ scene perspective, like kind of getting that visibility on the scene, and also I guess as a player that's trying to work towards something, it's probably a lot more exciting the idea of like having a pool play spot, playing against FaZe, being on main stage potentially, as opposed to like being going through the open bracket. So I know from my point of view, I feel like it's kind of like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I feel like it's kind of downsides to both, but I guess from like a scene perspective, I understand the point of view of like having the pool play spot. I think is like beneficial, but yeah, no, it's a tough one. I guess it's yeah. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about kind of ANZ Halo generally a little bit later, but I guess to
Yeah.
stick on you for a little bit. Like so, you went to that first American event, and then got to go to your second after you had the crazy Game 7 qualifier like with Looney, and I guess how did that like second NA event go for you compared to the first one? Like, was you kind of prepared a little bit differently? Do you think you like improved a lot in between them, or
Um, as much as that like that win was big for us in that Dallas qualifier, I think a lot of things lined up for us pretty like just pretty much on chance as well. We got pretty lucky. There was some pretty lucky wins in there. Like the whole reason why we got through the winners bracket in that qualifier was because it was a game 5 pit slayer 49-49.
yeah,
Our current team at the time was me and Ingestix, Ryu, and Divinity. We won that game 5 49-49 slayer. They had rockets. They had everything set up for them to get that last kill to win. We were stuck on our side. Ninjestix throws a cross map sticky grenade.
no,
Their player jumps out with the rockets, gets stuck,
oh my god,
and he dies. Like
That is insane.
it was actually like that whole tournament was actually just like it was a fairy tale.
No,
It was like
that is
not real.
nuts. I didn't get to
Yeah,
watch that. I think to be fair, it was like 5 a.m. for me, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, that was that was so crazy.
yeah.
And you said that was when you had Looney coaching you, right? I don't want to give Looney too much attention, but I guess how did that kind of come about, and what was that like? I guess having him as a coach.
Um, I think I don't know. I just heard I'd heard whispers about there's some European player coming into he's moving to Australia and stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I just saw it like as an opportunity to gain something. I'm like, okay, we've got a player coming from a different region. They definitely have another like a different way of thinking about the game, and like that's what I value, like perspective.
Yeah.
I just saw potential to have a new perspective on the game. And yeah, I ended up throwing him a message, just asking if he wanted to coach. I know other people had messaged him, but we were the most appealing offer at the time because
Yeah.
obviously we were within that top three, one of the most realistic teams like to go over to an event. So
Yeah, I feel like the
yeah,
thing I got to team with Looney for way too long, to be honest. I was kind of sick of it towards the end, but it was like I teamed with him for like years and years. We went to like a million events together. Like we went to like 2 NA events, and I think the thing with Looney is like he's a very kind of big personality, and I feel like that could be good for a team sometimes, having someone that can kind of like bring the vibes up and kind of initiate conversation and kind of have that positive energy. I guess from a coaching point of view, I don't know how many coaches you kind of had in Halo, but is that something that you think is important maybe for a coach, maybe just as much as like you said, kind of offering a different perspective and like how to play the game, but also like having someone that maybe mixes well with like the players' personalities maybe and like brings the best out of them?
yeah, for learning, I would say definitely like his energy and that side of things was where he brought the most value. How I see it is I see two different types of coaches, at least that like I value. There's the coaches who obviously can bring a lot of like gameplay knowledge. They're very, they've got most of the time they'll be like a veteran player, and like
Yeah,
NA you have like majority of these coaches have competed in the past. In ANZ it's not the same. We don't have like those types of players. So mainly over here we have like people like Looney who bring a lot of value.
yeah,
People like Looney because he's gone, but at the time, yeah, he brought a lot of energy, especially like a big thing in that qualifier itself. The energy he brought was pretty much they had like reset the bracket as well, and he was just telling us he was like, it's like we either win now or we win later. Like it's a game of attrition. Like he was just reinforcing the fact that like
yeah.
no matter what, we're gonna win. We have the energy and all this stuff. Like yeah,
Okay,
definitely for Looney, he brought a value in that aspect.
that's good. That's good to hear. At least at least he's doing something good for once. I like to hear that. I'm a big fan of Looney. And I guess after that second event, I guess how many more events did you end up going to in America after that one, or was that the last one you went to?
Well, because of how it all worked last year for us, pretty much the team that qualified for the invitationals were locked in for the pool play for the next major as well.
Okay.
So we went to Dallas. Dallas was a terrible event for us. It was really bad, mainly because uh, I'm just not a huge fan of those invitationals and how they work. They just felt
Yeah.
completely half-assed, especially for ANZ teams. We were flown out on the Wednesday. Arrived like I don't know. It was just yeah, jet lagged as fuck, pretty
Yeah.
much. Terrible. Um, then we went to Arlington. We lost pretty much a 4v3 against Native White when they had a
Oh, I remember
coach.
that
That was
series.
very disappointing. We were very up. I was very upset about that. Just again, ANZ placements. Then after that, I went to MyFreak. I replaced Sways, who had went to Divine Mind, and we ended up winning the qualifier for Salt Lake. And then yeah, we also went to Fort Worth.
Okay. And I guess throughout this, like you said, at this point you've kind of established yourself quite well. You've gone to multiple events. You're on a top team. I guess just kind of in between those events and like generally like your process to improving. Do you think you were doing anything maybe that kind of put you above the kind of average player in terms of like your work ethic or like things you did to improve, or was it just a matter of kind of like turning up to scrims, playing matchmaking? It was kind of like naturally you were like improving.
Um, no, I think I did a lot like of learning on my own. I sort of had to learn like how I like to say is I had to learn how to learn
Yeah.
because especially in ANZ, in ANZ it's a very different region here. I think NA have the they have the opportunity to just learn naturally through playing matchmaking. We don't have that over here. Like we can't just play the game. It's very hard for
Yeah,
us,
yeah,
especially to play matchmaking. Like we can play matchmaking, but what are you learning on 230 ping? How do you know what's right, what's wrong when half
yeah,
the time you're dying around walls? You already need to know what's wrong and right, so you can't really like learn through that way. Like my process was, yeah, pretty much learning how to learn, doing a lot of VOD on my own, talking to players, getting other people's perspectives. That's what I really valued the most when I was trying to learn is like I don't need to reinvent the wheel. People already know how to play the game, so I
yeah.
may as well get that knowledge from somebody who already knows rather than trying to learn myself.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think in terms of, I guess, was there any particular players you looked at? Because obviously, there's not a lot of top MNK players. So I guess that's also a difficulty of like, do you look at certain players and think, well, like he can't do what I can do, so maybe I should try like have a bit of my own style? Or was there any pros you really looked at and was like, I'm gonna try like play how he plays?
Um, Actually, on that, that's an interesting question because my whole approach, especially I forgot to mention in that whole year one, like my whole approach of Halo was that I did not feel like being an MNK player like warranted a different type of playstyle. I didn't feel like I feel like if anything, playing differently because of my input was gonna hinder me
Yeah,
and put me back because it's like, obviously I was playing at a disadvantage. So why am I like the last thing I should be doing is trying to play differently as well.
yeah, yeah,
I tried to pretty much just play like a controller player. That was my whole mindset as well. Play like a controller player. I would say when it comes to mouse and keyboard players, I'm the less flashy when it comes to like, oh, like I'm flicking, I'm flicking,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
hitting this crazy shot, hitting these crazy snipes. I don't like to play that way.
yeah.
I like to play a lot slower, take it in, not really like rush myself.
Yeah, I guess like I remember some of the scrims I saw your stats. I think it was like in between some of the events, you'd always have like insane damage, and I feel like almost kind of similar. So it reminded me of when Wootem kind of came into the EU scene. Like you'd look at the Halo data hive, and he'd have like 10k damage above everyone else, and then I feel like it was a similar story of you. And even I think Rice as well. When I'd look at his team, he'd always seem to have like a crazy amount of damage. Do you think it's got to the point now where like if the player is smart enough and good enough, there's a chance where MNK could be like superior to controller in Halo, or do you still think it's like kind of 50-50?
I would say with the BR, yes. With the DMR, I feel like keyboard and mouse is actually at a disadvantage currently because
Okay.
I don't really want to get into it all. A lot of it's just very technical when it comes to just like individual values comparing the inputs, like
Okay.
aim assist and all that.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah, with the BR, I felt like mouse and keyboard had a real good shot of being superior if it had the right player on the input.
Yeah.
Like, even when Royal 2 was just playing, on stream during off season, I feel like if Royal 2 actually competed on mouse and keyboard and committed to it, he could have only God knows how gotten better
Yeah.
at like because obviously to an extent you're limited on control to what you can do. You can only turn so fast, you can only do things so fast, but on mouse and keyboard you can become unlocked.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like.
Yeah,
Yeah, MNK to me, like I've not really had the chance of playing it. I mean, I played it before, but not at like any kind of level that's like worth even talking about. But from my point of view, it's like I feel like the potential you have in like certain situations. But like, I'm generally quite like a low sense player and controller, so like if I'm pushing like from gold pipes to turbine on recharge, I have to like take into account my sensitivity as I'm like walking in there, and like if I get caught looking the wrong way, I'm like fucked, and I gotta like hope I come 180 quick enough. Whereas like on MNK, you've kind of got that ability to like approach situations in like ways that controller players can't. And I think for me, like I know a lot of people talk about like, oh, you can be so precise and oh, you can aim so well like with snipers and things, but for me I feel like the turn speed is like such a big thing. Well, like, if your aim is just decent on MNK, I feel like that turn speed, like if you're a smart player, I think like your ceiling of how like good you can be is like just like so insane.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For sure, yeah. The advantage of being able to just turn, flick everything. That definitely does help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a Switch basically is what I'm saying. I'm kind of bad. I guess I don't want to skip any events if there's anything like kind of that happened that I wasn't too aware of because I'm not like the most kind of tuned into the ANZ scene. But I think one thing I was kind of curious to talk about that's happened more recently is the whole kind of I guess mini roster mania that happened with your team with Barco kind of being on the team and going, and then the kind of qualifiers that happened afterwards. So I think if I'm not mistaken, right, was it you Barcode, and who's the other two players off the top of my head? I'm trying to think. It was
Sways and
Oh
slays.
yeah, Sways and Slays. So was that when I first saw that team, I was like, oh my god, it's like the ANZ God Squad. Like this is like some serious business. And I was thinking straight away of like, oh, this team could actually like maybe like compete quite well in pool play in America, like against like like a Cloud9 or like those kind of teams, especially like you were saying earlier on about losing to that team when they had I think trade tries to coach. I was like, well, if that team was against that team, like I think you guys would win that like quite comfortably. So I guess a few questions about that. I guess how did that team come about? What was your kind of feelings when that team did happen? And then I guess of course your reaction when I guess things went the other way and Barcode ended up having to kind of go to America again.
Um, I would say like the initial approach to that team was pretty much all on just the fact that obviously Barcode being here was obviously going to sway the region and make it very one-sided and very stacked.
Yeah.
Um, obviously at the end of the day, it came down to, I guess, Barcode seeing value in a player like me, I guess. Like, obviously, I was friends with Alex, but I know he wouldn't just team with anybody as well. As much as he wanted to, team with people who he likes, being around, he obviously, at the end of the day, is a competitor and he wants to win. So I would say that region just, I mean, that roster would just was a result of, um, yeah, just Alex thinking
Yeah.
of a roster that he thinks could go over and win while also, enjoying his time.
Yeah. And
And
then was I guess after
yeah,
that, how,
leading
how long
leading
did you
into
have that
your
team for? Was it like one? Was it just one tournament, right? I think you guys had, and you kind of won
um
fairly comfortably, I think. And then after that, he
yeah,
got kind of poached away from native again.
I would say it was a solid maybe week and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah, not too long. Did you learn anything in the week and a half, or was it kind of just turn up and
No, fuck no.
play?
Definitely not. I did not learn anything in that week and a half, especially considering that one tournament was just flawless. No match dropped.
Yeah, not bad, not
So
bad. I guess what was that like afterwards when you found out he was leaving? I guess what was the thought process you guys kind of went through in terms of like your options for a replacement? Like, was you kind of limited in your options, or did you kind of have a kind of free reign of ANZ?
I would say we pretty much had free reign. We took a pretty big risk, which obviously ended up being uh like I wouldn't say a bad choice. I'd just say we didn't have enough time
Yeah.
to work out our problems because obviously losing Barcode, definitively best player by far, in replacement of we decided to pick up Benji, who was my previous teammate on Mindfreak.
Okay.
Um, we decided to go with him, and he hadn't played the game in like a couple, like 4 months, pretty much towards the end of the season. He had some just like personal shit he was dealing with, so he
Okay.
didn't really get too much time on the game during the off season. So we decided to go with him, and yeah, we just didn't have enough time really to put everything together to get everything working as well as we wanted to.
Yeah.
And obviously that resulted us in placing second and not qualifying.
And I guess the team you ended up playing against, I was a little bit surprised of I guess how good that team was. I think one of the players, is it Strafe Noble is his game tag, I think. I think he's
Yep.
on the team. I hadn't really heard of him before this game. I don't know if he's new to Infinite or if he played any of the Halos, but I think him and Rice have been a kind of a bit of a duo. It feels like now for a while, and I think getting rated on that team as well. He's obviously was really strong on that Divine Mind roster, was it? I guess were you surprised at how competitive that team was against you guys with the new pickup, or did you kind of expect it to be as close as it was in those tournaments?
Um, I can't say I'm surprised that it was competitive. I would just say I'm more. I was just hoping that we were gonna do better than we were. It was
Yeah,
more so just. I know that those four players on that team, they're very individually capable. I know that those guys are very skilled, and they obviously like, especially I especially give props to those guys because they were locking in and putting the work in, even when we did have Barcode.
yeah,
I could not imagine being in that like headspace of where you know that you're at that huge disadvantage. There's only one spot, and you're still deciding to lock in and put in the work when you know that you might not even take a map after weeks of VOD, weeks of theory, weeks of scrims.
yeah.
So those guys, they really invested their time, and in the end, it worked out well for them. They obviously deserved to qual, and they did.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, obviously, a big fan of you, and I'm happy to see you get to go to so many events last year. But also, I was kind of happy on a kind of silver lining of like, oh well, at least some new players get to kind of experience kind of going. I think Rice has been before, but I feel like I've not seen him like over there as much. and he's one of those players where I don't really know him on a personal level, but I know he streams a lot, so I've kind of had a lot of chances to watch his point of view, and then I think similar to you, just kind of looking at some of the scrim results and seeing this kind of crazy stats he has sometimes. I think it's kind of funny that arguably two of the best kind of mouse and keyboard players are both from Australia, and I guess is that like a kind of
Other than Woodham, of
yeah,
course.
other than Wooten, yeah, he's a bit newer,
Yeah,
you know. But I think you three,
yeah.
especially the main three, I'm looking at. I know in America there's quite a few good ones as well. But I guess what's that like? Does it kind of motivate you a little bit more having like a very competitive mouse and keyboard player in the same region as you to kind of be on your A game and kind of try like be number one?
Um, Not really, to be honest. Like, I would say, like I was talking about before, my whole approach to controller app to keyboard and mouse was trying to play like a controller player.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, like I said, I think keyboard and mouse players' biggest fault is them thinking about the fact that they're playing on keyboard and mouse.
yeah,
I do obviously believe in playing to your strengths. Obviously, keyboard and mouse does have its strengths, and you should play to it. But um, no, I don't really feel like it's a competition between whoever's on what input. I just feel like at the end of the day, I want to be the best player that I can be,
yeah,
regardless of what input I'm playing on. Uh, and the whole part of in the first year when I was playing at the disadvantages, I believe that being a good Halo player was infinitely worth more than being good at mouse keyboard or being good mechanically at on controller. I felt like just having good fundamentals was always going to put you in a position
yeah, yeah,
where you didn't have to rely on your mechanics. Like, if you're just in a better position, you decide whether or not gunfights happen or not,
yeah, yeah.
just things like that.
I guess reflecting now on recently, obviously having that disappointment of not qualifying as that like, kind of first seed. I guess has this been one of the I guess bigger disappointments in your kind of in your Halo career you've had so far? And I guess how I know it's only happened quite recently, but I guess how has it maybe affected your outlook in terms of like the future of your competitive career? Has it made you more motivated, or has it made you kind of have to reflect a little bit on what you're thinking of your like future teams being or your kind of future goals?
Honestly, I would say this is one of my least disappointing failures, to be honest. I would say it's probably the best that I've felt coming out of a loss. I would say that I'm more motivated now than I was prior to the qualifiers for sure.
Okay.
The biggest loss that I ever took was the Worlds Quals at Fort Worth, where we played on Divine Mine on LAN
Oh yeah, yeah.
for the world spot. That was by far the worst that I felt after any loss. I would say a good 2-3 months. I was even thinking about it. It would make me feel horrible.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
guess was how was that? I guess obviously at the time it was terrible, but do you think I guess reflecting on it long term, it was almost like a good thing that you've had that experience now and you've kind of had the experience of dealing with it and getting past it and kind of extracting the good parts from it? Do you think that's kind of just part of your journey, maybe of being a competitive player, is having to deal with those things? And do you think maybe you've learned some lessons from that for like your future, I guess, career?
yeah, I would say that Fort Worth loss. Obviously, I was Worlds was very like qualifying for Worlds was a huge thing for me. It was like my end goal. Obviously, everybody wants to go to the World Championship. That
Yeah,
is like the event for the year. So, even though like I didn't end up going, I feel like it was a huge lesson for me to not go to that event because that loss pretty much the reason why I felt so bad was I would say that like prior to that event I was a bit of a little shit when it came to talking shit.
yeah,
Talked a lot of shit prior to that event and I got put in my fucking place. So I would say I did learn a big valuable lesson from that is shut your fucking mouth. Don't talk as much. Do
yeah,
more work. Obviously, I was doing the work, but it just wasn't enough.
yeah.
Um,
Would you say the shit talk kind of mentality, did that come from anywhere in terms like you think it was going to help you succeed, or was it the kind of thing of like you were trying to like kind of get in there in your opponent's head, or was it literally just a case of like I'm so confident I'm just going to shit talk you?
yeah, it was more so the confidence in my ability and the confidence in their inability.
Yeah,
I felt like, um, obviously, I'm teaming with some of the people who at the time I was playing against, but
yeah,
to be honest, last year I did not think those guys deserved to be in a position where they would be going to the world championship. That's another reason why I was
yeah,
very disappointed. I felt like a lot of the players in the region were really unmotivated and entitled and felt like they just expected to go to these events.
Yeah.
And obviously, as a newer player coming in, I felt that mindset was just very, it just felt wrong to me.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to prove to these players that they didn't deserve to go. But in the end, shit talking actually did the complete opposite and gave them a reason to beat me.
Yeah.
Initially, they didn't have a reason, and I felt like they weren't motivated to put in the effort. But then I ended up giving them a reason to put in the effort.
No. Yeah, it's so weird
That's
as
the
well
biggest
because
lesson that I learned.
I feel like from my experience as well, like it's one of those things where like if you scrim against a team a bunch online, you play them in online tournaments, and like you can kind of get this sense of like confidence, like yeah, I'm better than these guys, like we're just like destroying them. But then I feel like some people when they get to LAN, they just like can step it up a level. And I know like there's always this thing of like, oh, you know, wait till this guy gets to LAN, he's so much better. But I feel like it's not necessarily, in my opinion at least, a thing of like people becoming that much better on LAN. I think it's that they don't like give it 100% online, and they almost like save a little bit for when they get to LAN. And I guess was that something as well you think maybe came into effect of like, you know, players like Berserk, these players that have been around for a while, they kind of ultimately kind of saved their 110% for when they got to that big LAN match? And do you think that maybe caught you guys off guard a little bit, or was it maybe you guys kind of underperforming in that series?
I think it was a bit of both, to be honest. I think they definitely like obviously gave us a good run for our money and ended up beating us. They definitely did put a lot more effort into LAN. Because obviously I know how they were thinking as well because I'm teaming currently with some of those players who
Yeah,
are on that
yeah,
roster, and they've even said to me themselves that particular players didn't really give a shit about online
yeah,
and were just putting all their eggs in that basket for LAN, pretty much. Just yeah.
yeah.
So
I,
they
Yeah, I think that happens to a lot of I think older players as well. Like they've kind of struggling for motivation. It almost takes someone to like shit talk them, or takes like a land for like that, like to give them the full motivation to like, give it 110%. And like you said, I think you having that experience was, you know, even though it was terrible, I think it's good to kind of get out of the way, kind of early-ish potentially in your Halo career. You know, so hopefully you
yeah.
haven't got to deal with it too much going forward. And I guess something I'm curious to talk about, and I'm not sure exactly how to word it, so I might waffle a little bit, but I guess, you know, being an ANZ competitor, like, what is, I guess, your goal, like generally in terms of where you see like yourself able to go? Because I think, you know, being an EU player myself, like there was always the thing of like, oh, I want to go to Worlds if I can, and then, you know, seeing EU teams kind of cap out in Halo 5 a lot, kind of top 16, top 12, maybe top 8. I think we got like one top 6. Like you start maybe getting that idea in your head that like this is what an EU player is capable of achieving. And I guess now seeing Legends, you know, go to SSG, Quadrant get third. I guess from an ANZ perspective, because maybe there's not been too much success internationally, I guess apart from Barcode, do you find it hard to like keep yourself motivated, kind of given the state of the scene, and like push yourself to want to keep kind of improving? Or do you think despite those challenges, like there's still a lot you can achieve as an ANZ Halo player?
Um, I really do believe like despite the challenges, I think we can be better and do better.
Yeah,
And I would say personally for me, my ultimate goal is to go over to NA because how I see it is pretty much if I'm not playing for the top, if I'm not playing for the best outcome that I like that's possible, then what am I playing for?
yeah,
If I'm just playing to be like good in ANZ, then why compete at all? Because I just don't feel like that's worth that time and effort. Like if I'm playing for pennies at the end of the day,
yeah, yeah,
well, it's just yeah. So in the end, I would say my goal is to pretty much just like follow what Barcode's done,
yeah.
try and get over to NA, and yeah,
Do you think
be
having
be the
someone
best player
like
that I can
him,
be.
like as a kind of a thing that like he's proven that it's possible, do you think that's like really helped you in terms of like motivating you to realize like if I just keep improving, I'll eventually kind of get my shot hopefully and kind of end up in one of those teams?
Yeah, obviously having like a real case of a player making it out of here is definitely like a good way to reel yourself back in because over here it is very difficult to find the motivation because of just the state of the region pretty much.
Yeah,
Like a lot of our good players from like year one have retired. There's a lot of new talent taking over. So and obviously, you know, it's harder to play the game here just because of population and all that.
yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely like a good way to reel yourself back in when you lose that motivation to have that reminder that despite the odds, somebody has made it, so why can't you, sort
yeah.
of thing.
And I guess have you spoke to Barcode at all about like any strategies or just advice for like getting yourself noticed internationally and like things you can do? I mean, I know you stream a lot already. I think that's definitely, in my opinion at least, one of the most important things is like being visible. Is there anything else I guess you've got that you're kind of working on to I guess up your profile in the scene or just kind of hopefully get you noticed a bit more kind of by international players?
Um, I would say like there's two big things that I value when it comes to like my approach to like obviously trying to make it to my end goal, trying to get to NA is definitely like the first point would obviously be exposure because how I see is you could be say you had a barcode, right? If you were barcode during that whole first year, imagine if barcode didn't stream. Imagine if barcode didn't do all the extra shit that he did.
Yeah,
He would be the best player in the region, but who would know? Who would know that? Who would know how good he is if he isn't showcasing what he's capable of, you know?
yeah,
And then obviously on the other side of that coin is, being good enough to showcase yourself. I would say that's probably the biggest factor for me right now is I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like that's definitely the side of it that I need to be doing better at. Um, I would say the biggest disappointment about this like loss for the Arlington qualifier is that I felt like I needed to have like a really clean run this year to prove myself. Feel
yeah,
like I had to win from start to finish. And obviously, I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I can change how I approach going into the next qualifiers. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I guess like from my point of view as well, I think as well as just like with the streaming, obviously it's good to kind of get your skill noticed. But I think with Barcode from the outside looking in, I think for me, I think him having like a very outgoing kind of positive personality, I think from the rip, I think that probably must have helped as well. Because I'm sure when people are looking for teammates internationally, like if it's someone that is kind of approachable and kind of has that good energy, I think that's always got to be good. And I guess at least from an Australian Halo point of view, there's not that kind of worry about like adapting to a new language and things like that, like you have with some EU players or some maybe like LATAM players. I mean, so I guess from that point of view, if you've got the talent, hopefully it should be a little bit more kind of seamless to transition over. And I guess now after the qualifier, obviously you guys had that disappointing loss, and obviously you haven't got to go into it if it's like a touchy subject. But in terms of your current roster, is there any kind of looks to change things up potentially, or are you kind of thinking of just kind of sticking it through and maybe working through things?
There's definitely a lot of factors that we need to consider right now. I'd say a lot of it just comes down to individual players and just circumstance. It's not really a lot about in-game because I'm a huge believer in working through problems and
Yeah,
hardship and getting through those hardships because obviously coming out on the other side of hardships really proves that like as a team you can achieve anything.
yeah,
But at this current point, I would say yeah, we still have a lot to consider. So we haven't really made a decision on what to
okay.
do yet.
And I guess has anything evolved maybe in your philosophy in terms of how you think about building your teams? Like how much like kind of emphasis do you put into like vibes, like personalities working together, play styles, speed, or do you just be like, let's just get the four best players and like work things out as we go?
Um, when it comes to like assembling a roster, I would say a big thing right now for us is that it's just the mix of playstyles we have right now. We really need to work on just how we are as players and where we need to be, what we need to be doing. I don't believe in putting the four best players together. I would say we got away with it with Barcode because obviously it's Barcode.
Yeah,
You put him on any roster, it doesn't matter who he's playing with, you're gonna win because yeah, I don't even need to explain that, but yeah, we're taking away like having like Captain America on your team, or in this case Captain Australia. Um, yeah, I believe in having the right mix of players, the right mix of play styles, because if you've got four people just running forward at the same shit all the time, that's just not how the game works. It's not how you win
yeah,
games. Especially in this game, it's very team orientated. It's about being in the right place, looking at the right thing,
yeah.
not necessarily about being on top of each other and shooting.
Yeah, I guess from like your point of view, I'm curious to like get in your words. Like, what is it you think like your main assets like you bring to a team in terms of like your strengths?
Um, I would say my best assets are probably I like to consider myself like more of like a leader, more of somebody who likes to take charge and sort of make sure everyone's on the right track and doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
I like to. I feel like a part of that would be just lifting people up, trying to like help my teammates be the best players they can be. I believe in if you aren't actively helping your teammates be the best players they can be, then you have no right to sort of criticize
Yeah.
and tear them down.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, if like you're one person, you're an individual, and your teammates are three-quarters of your team.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you're the least valuable asset on the team unless you decide to be a part of that other three-quarters and lift them up as well.
Yeah. And in terms of like you being that leader, is that something that like you think your kind of personality kind of made you lean towards kind of doing naturally, or is it something that you kind of thought, if I want the best chance of succeeding, I need to kind of take that role on and like embrace it and become like a good leader?
Um, I don't think it's a part of my personality. I think people would like when it comes to my personality, if I was judged purely of that, people would probably consider me the opposite of a leader. I would say
Yeah.
I'm very unserious a lot of the time. I like to sort of fuck around a bit, but when it comes to like playing and competing, that's when I really lock in. And I would say I took on that role to, yeah, like you said, I feel like it was something that has to be done to be the best player I can be and be on the best team that I can be on.
Yeah, well, I think as well, just having that kind of like part of your personality is like a little bit more kind of like chilled out and like not as serious. It probably helps because I think if someone's just 100% locked in serious all the time, it's probably not going to make them like as likable as a person, which probably isn't going to make them as good of a leader. So I think it's good to kind of be able to flip that switch, in my opinion at least, and kind of go between the two. And
Yeah.
I guess like you said, going forward, in terms of like your commitment to Halo, is it in terms of like the hours you're putting in, is it like similar to what it's been the last kind of year or so, or are you having to kind of balance it out with anything, or kind of find ways to kind of be the most efficient in how you improve?
I believe in like taking the most efficient approach, which I consider to be putting in the right hours and not the most amount of hours. I
Yeah,
feel like putting the right hours into the right places, like, obviously putting in time to theory, practicing that theory in scrims, and then going over your VOD and, talking about, are we doing these things we're talking about? Are we applying the things that we want to do? Are we playing the way we want to play, sort of thing? I would say that comes first. That's like the necessity to
yeah,
get better. And then obviously putting in more hours does help, of course. Playing the game, being more familiar with the mechanics, just being more consistent. Because I feel like putting in more hours consistently is the way to be consistent. You have
yeah,
to
yeah.
be putting in the same amount of hours all the time
Yeah,
to.
so it's better to have like 4 or 5 hours a day rather than like 12 hours than having a day off and then like a random 14 hour. I feel like yeah, that's something I agree with. I think
Yeah.
if you have like those random 2 3 day breaks, it can hit you hard, especially if you like do it too consistently. I guess as an EU
Yeah.
player, I was just curious to get your opinion on Wootum as a fellow MNK player. I guess how much opportunity have you had to kind of see his point of view or kind of watch Foe in action? And I guess first of all, like, what's your opinion on him generally as a player? But also, is there anything that you've been able to like take from how he plays or how he's approached the game as a MNK player?
Admittedly, I haven't watched Woodham as much as I should be, to be honest. Because, obviously, looking at, Data Hive results and everything, he's clearly exceptional. It's like, not only is he putting up these numbers, but he's winning, which is the most important thing. So
Yeah,
obviously, the numbers he's putting up mean something, and they're obviously doing something for that team. Especially considering roster changes, obviously, so obviously they were winning with Snipe Drone going to Quadrant, them having Chick and still winning, which is
yeah,
like from my perspective, and I'm sure you guys probably share a similar perspective. Like that's pretty fucking crazy,
yeah. No, I was saying
especially
like
through.
if Wooten didn't come around in EU Halo, like I don't know what would happen to that team because I feel like when Glory left, it was like how the hell do you replace Glory? And it's like suddenly Wooten just comes out of nowhere almost. It seems like, and it's like oh I'm pretty good as well. And it's just I feel like obviously it's too soon to say yet because we've not seen him at like a big LAN, a big series arguably. But I think just at the moment it seems like he might potentially already be on that kind of Snipe and Glory level, which I think considering how new he is to the scene is like nuts. And I think what you were saying as well earlier on about how it's been difficult for MNK players sometimes to switch over because they've not maybe got that experience playing Halo. But I think knowing that he came from Splitgate, which I know it's a different game, but it's like a arena FPS. It's like not like Counter Strike or Valorant, and I think that probably would have helped him as well. But I think also just having that like raw talent, and I think Wonderboy was talking about it as well, like his mentality. I think as a player, he's like very stoic, like he's just locked in all the time, like doesn't get overly emotional from the seam of it. I think for someone that's like so new to the Halo scene, he seems to have like a lot of the kind of boxes ticked in terms of like being the full package.
Yeah, no, definitely. Um, oh yeah, I would say people definitely underrate the Splitgate experience because, at least from like my experience playing that game, and I would say like in ANZ, Splitgate was actually like it got big at a point. ANZ was actually like better than NA at Splitgate. It was like towards the very start, but developers just decided to fuck us off completely, decided to cuck us, so pretty much everyone decided to quit. Um, but yeah, that game fundamentally, I feel like if it helped, if that developed further in ANZ, I feel like I would have come into Halo with a way bigger advantage.
Yeah,
But we didn't get enough time to develop um, enough, fundamentals in Splitgate. But yeah, Woodham coming over from obviously Space Station in that game, being on like a top team, that game fundamentally plays a lot like Halo. So that knowledge definitely gave him a huge boost. He was pretty much playing just like a different version of Halo
yeah.
before coming to Infinite, I feel.
And I guess last thing I was curious to kind of get your thoughts on is obviously moving forward in ANZ. I'm not 100% sure on I guess how the roadmap is for ANZ Halo, but I guess what does like the rest of your year look like in terms of the online cups, your opportunities to qualify? Is it one spot all year for ANZ, or does it go to two at all for any of the events?
From how it looks now, I think it's just gonna be one spot for the rest of the year. So
Okay.
really have to lock in. There's really no more room. There's no more room for error. And as much as people fucking hate online Halo, for us in ANZ right now, like we have to fucking we have to do our best because
Yeah.
that's all we have right now. Like I was actually talking to my teammate Sways, who was obviously on that Divine Mind roster who beat us at Worlds, and if they were if it was this year with one spot, Divine Mind never would have ended up going to Worlds because they were putting all their eggs on that LAN,
Yeah.
And for us, there's just no reality of a LAN, so online is everything we have, sadly enough.
Yeah, and I guess a random final question. I just thought of it off the top of my head. I guess how do you see the team that beat you? I can't remember their team name. Is it team? I think they got an org recently. They announced, but that the team that qualified from ANZ, Rice and Co. to go. I guess how do you see them getting on potentially in the open bracket?
I would say I obviously I hope that they do well. I hope they get a good placement because at this point, considering we only have one team going over, I feel like the team going over right now, it's bigger than just being a team. You're pretty much representing the whole region.
Yeah.
One team to every event. You're pretty much team ANZ, so you're representing pretty much everyone back home. So the result of that team pretty much will affect our outcome and how other regions perceive us. Um, I think they can do well because I mean, I obviously have no right to say that they're not going to. They beat us.
Yeah.
They outplayed us, and to be frank, I was very actually impressed with how well they were playing and how fundamentally sound they were. So yeah, I think they can definitely do well. I think is it the open bracket or the whole tournament that's capped at 64 teams? I
Oh.
think it's just the open bracket, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Probably the open bracket. I'm not sure actually off the top of my head, but yeah, I'd like to see them. I think getting through pools could be a bit difficult, but I think they could be like maybe like one or two series removed, maybe from like being in that qualification match. I think that's where for me I'd like to see them. I think that's kind of similar story for us in like the third place EU team. I think like I don't expect them to make it out of open bracket just because how stacked it is, but I think it'd be nice to see them at least like be competitive, like you say, because just like it represents the region well. It like gives you guys like a bit of like motivation to think if they can make it there, so can I. So yeah, I hope it goes well. And like I said, obviously disappointed that you guys didn't get to qualify, but I think it's nice to see like different players kind of get the opportunity. And yeah, obviously not. Ideally, we'd like it to be two or three spots for ANZ, but I think on the bright side, it might it might make things very very exciting for the online qualifiers for the next few months. So yeah, to see how it goes. But yeah, like I appreciate you giving me your time though. I know it's quite early for you, but I appreciate
It's my pleasure.
I
I
appreciate the
love
chat.
doing this shit.
That's
I
fair.
love interviews. I love all that.
That's alright. Now,
That's why I like streaming. I like to stream
I'll have to get
frequently.
the whole team on sometime. Okay, I'll get everyone. But yeah, like I say, I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you again, Scoobmeister, for coming on, and we will see
Thank
you
you,
again
everybody.
next time. See ya.
Peace.